we need to like light a fire.
Best show I've ever been to! It was everything!
I suppose it's been very rewarding that I've really, truly just been myself. Niche is rewarded so much more than it ever has been. And I think the labels, yeah, they got it. They got on board and they left me alone. And that's really all I've ever wanted, to be left alone.
If you think about one word that sums up Charli XCX this year, we all know what it is. But there are so many more words that can apply. If you've been on this ride with Charli forever, then yeah, it's hard, working, visionary, creative, ambitious, adventurous. If it's your first impression, iconic seems pretty good. And yeah, brat, but it's more than that. In fact, yeah, let's sum them all up with one word. Charli.
Charli XCX's first song. At 14, she persuaded her parents to loan her some money to record her album titled, 14. In the early days of MySpace in 2008, she began posting demos on the pages, which led to performances at warehouse and rave parties. Borrowing this money, she would get some equipment and begin to record her debut single. It was very impressive for a 14-year-old to make such a record, but compared to her later quality, obviously this is trash compared to that. But for a 14-year-old in 2008, this was groundbreaking. This was amazing, and it was the beginning of something special. But on paper, that wasn't her first single. On paper, her first single was later, 4 years later, in 2012, I Love It, where it was, more of a pop record where she would blow up from. But the real debut single was when she was 14, before she dropped her album 14. But it was the beginning of something special, as Charli would become a household name. Charli XCX was on the ground for 10 years. Now, how did this happen? Well, after her 5-album contract with Atlantic Records, she went shopping for a new record label. She admitted that she had almost signed with Interscope, but returned to Atlantic because the deal they offered her was something she couldn't refuse. And now, in the deal, it explicitly says she owns her masters, which means she owns control of the final mix and master, which means she owns the music basically. It's hers, it's not for the label. And she takes control of her marketing, which means she has creative control of how the label markets her to the general public. And also her manager, Brandon Creed, negotiated the deal to Charli's success. And now, why is she so successful and how did she leave the underground? Well, this was more due to having a bigger marketing budget from her label, which allowed her a more creative freedom to be able to express herself and be marketed how she wanted to be marketed, which obviously allows her to reach a bigger audience and be more mainstream, with more marketing dollars spent on her album Brat. Also, she had found a balance between experimental and popular. She leaned always more experimental throughout her entire career in the underground, but with Brat she balanced it more experimental but with a touch of popular sounds, but with very, very experimental taste in the music. Now with that combination, that's lit a fire that couldn't be stopped with the album Brat, and why it's a global success. It took over 2024 completely, and it was an album to remember that year for Brat. It became a whole aesthetic, a whole experience. It was more than just the music, it was an experience. It was the year 2024 was Brat to a lot of people because of that album, because of the experience Charli XCX created, because
people didn't exactly understand it.
I would say Pitchfork 4.1, not that I'm remembering, but then they re-reviewed, guys.
Again,
I totally don't care about Pitchfork, by the way, just so you know.
I think though that, I mean, I would obviously, from my perspective, I would defend that critic for having the opinion, because the point is you've
my
made
gosh.
something that's made them like puke.
Charli XCX, known as Charli XCX, began releasing music on MySpace as a teenager in 2008. After getting the attention of local promoters in Essex, she started to perform at illegal raves with the support of her parents. It didn't take long for XCX to get signed to Asylum Records and begin working on a dark electro debut album, True Romance. A year before True Romance came out, however, XCX had her first brush with hit making thanks to the 2012 single I Love It. She ended up not feeling like it was fit for her own sound at the time, and it eventually was recorded by Swedish pop duo Icona Pop, who kept XCX vocals on the track as well. The song became #1 hit around the world and hit #7 on the Billboard 100. But in 2014, she had her first #1 hit in the US, featuring Iggy Azalea on her song Fancy, as well as her first top 10 single as a solo artist with the song Boom Clap. Her sophomore album Soccer released that October and became her first album to chart on the Billboard. Soon enough, Charli would establish herself as a pop's most forward-thinking author. She was very experimental, very underground. Her instrumentals were very electric, synth-heavy, and very, very futuristic, to say the least. The 2016 EP Vroom Vroom was made in collaboration with D. It took her time to find this sound as she experimented over and over again with different producers, different people, to find the sound she loves the most. Especially on her sophomore album Soccer, she would have to experiment over and over and over again in the studio to get the perfect sound which would fit her aesthetic or fit her as an artist at the time. In 2022, she released her album Crash, which was her, she's according to her, sellout album, where she would create more catchy pop music, more attuned to what we see today with Taylor Swift and the rest of the pop girls who are on top of the world right now. But it wasn't true to her. She obviously had #1 hits over and over again, but it wasn't her breakout. It was more of something to keep her sustainable in the industry, and it was a sellout album where she didn't feel artistically comfortable, but she released the album nonetheless and got some hits from it. But it wasn't until 2024 where everything changed.
That was Sophie, mainly myself and Sophie, Stargate, because their drums are kind of crazy, actually, like that, like neo, like 2000s like drum thing they do. It's kind of wild, and I was really excited for like them and Sophie to be working. And Blood Pop, we made this record together. It got leaked. I was like, well, I'm not putting it out, because it was a different time, you know, than now, where it's kind of just like, you know, it was like a different time. So then I was lost. I was in this period of like, well, what am I doing? Like, I've spent like 6 months of my life, like, and so much money on this record, and now I'm kind of back to square one. And I can't even remember how me and Alex AG started kind of going to the studio together, but we just sort of got on this like train together where we were like super inspired to work. We're in ways, even though I think most people don't think it, we're so similar. We're like both only children, both like addicted to working. So we kind of like fueled this like thing between each other. And we were also at the time both in kind of relationships that were like not going great. So I think we wanted to like escape to making music.
Didn't you write a whole album in a day at one point?
Yeah, we did. We would always set ourselves these like funny challenges. I'd like text him at 9 a.m. and be like, hey, should we just like make an album in a day? And he'd be like, yeah, sure. And then
do you think that would be more stressful for him or for you?
Neither. Like, honestly, we both really like love it. And we were also like partying a lot. I mean, he doesn't really party that much. Like, he goes to parties, but he doesn't really like party, like, you know, whatever. Anyways, sorry. So, you know, I was partying and he was at parties maybe. And we, you know, he was DJing a lot and we were just like in it with each other. And I think, you know, he would play like a track at a party and I'd like record it on my phone. I'd be like, what is this track that you played? Like, I want to write over it. And that we would just kind of like out and we were like in each other's pockets. We would like go to New York for a week because I had a show and he was going to DJ and then we'd make tracks there. And then it was so fun. And actually, we were talking about this time with Addison Rae recently because she was kind of asking about specifically Pop 2 and like the energy and how we created that vibe. And we both didn't really know at the time. We were not consciously thinking about anything. We were just kind of like running into a wall and being like, let's make music all the time. Let's like live and breathe it. It's our life, like with our friends. We're at parties. We're like going to a party. Then we're going to go to the studio at 6 a.m. We're going to like make this track. He had a studio actually in like Seven Sisters that was also in a club for a while. So that was cool. You know, it felt very old school actually, like the kind of like old school way of like making a record with one person and being so locked in. And it was just like a whirlwind. And I think we kind of like rescued each other. I'm not quite sure from what, but from something. We were really like in it together. And yeah, now we just have this like offhand, we can just, it's so fluid between us, the way that we work, you know? There's no ego or pressure. It's amazing. Okay, cool. I just did speak a lot. I'm sorry.
I mean, those two mixtapes, I'm so sure that I speak for people in this room. Like, I think they really meant a lot to people as well. They just appeared, I don't know, they've sort of filled a gap that you might not even have known was there for that type of really, really weird, adventurous pop music, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think what we've maybe seen then with the last few projects, so you've got mixtapes going into the Charli album, which is maybe more, you know, it has more, slightly more well-rounded pop shape to it, I guess you could say. The Lockdown album, which again you made in 6 weeks.
Five,
yeah.
Yeah.
How I'm Feeling Now, which goes back, I think, towards some quite, you know, into some quite wild experimental places. And then Crash, which, I mean, to me seemed like almost a sort of, you know, mischievous, like attempt to go completely disgustingly pop, like huge.
Yeah, totally.
So there's this ongoing, like almost like a pendulum swing, it seems, like a sort of tension between this, you know, this desire to make really sonically challenging music and have a disgustingly massive audience. So yeah, how are you continuing to like navigate that tension?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super aware of that, and so are all the people that I work with. I think I'm addicted to the pendulum. I feel like good artists are, because you kind of have to burn down what you did and reject it to then go on to be the complete polar opposite of that. I've always struggled with like my position as a person and an artist. I think as I get older, there are moments where I feel a lot more confident within what that position is, but I totally can backtrack and be back to square one, where I'm sort of like, why aren't I the hugest artist in the world and everybody knows Vroom Vroom? And then I'll be like, well, actually, no, I'm kind of cool with being this like girl, you know? And then I'm like, no, fuck that girl. I want to be like XYZ or, you know, whatever. Like, I'm getting better with it. But I also think it's really important to say that like my music is like, I'm not like a political artist, right? My music and my artistry is about the concept of being an artist and the concept of pop music and pop music in pop culture. And so for me, the pendulum has to swing to give me that dialogue, you know, because it's about that inner turmoil. Like across all records, it's always about the inner turmoil. Even if I'm singing about romance or, I don't know, like going to the shops or whatever, the lens is through this look at the industry. Like that's always where I'm coming from, you know? So my work needs to have this swing to allow me to kind of overlord on that particular moment, whether it's the sellout crash moment or whether it's doing something super intricate and more bedroom feeling like how I'm feeling now. You know, I have to dive and take big swings between the two to keep my narrative of what is it to be a pop star going, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. What does that feel like though when you're in this mode of like, well, I mean, you said it then, like, this is the sellout album. Like, is there a limit to that? Like, how sellout do you go for that experience, you know?
I mean, I did like every brand deal that came my way during Crash. It was great. And I like justified it by being like, well, it's a sellout album. Yeah, it's fine, it's you know? So that was cool. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it has to run deeper than this sort of outfit that you put on, you know. It's when I'm doing Crash, the sellout album, I'm fucking in it. I'm not like a toe in. I'm like that girl. I'm going there. I mean, because what is art without conviction? It's crap, you know. So I feel like you have to be convicted for it to be good, and that's kind of what I feel about anything. And that's why I think some artists are great and some artists aren't that good, to be honest.
Is it the case that,
sorry,
like I feel like there, yeah, right? Yeah.
And those artists are never.
Well, is it the case that there aren't many artists in front of you, ahead of you, previously, something who you can look to and say, yes, that's the kind of career that I want? I mean,
I've never really wanted anyone's career. I've been asked that question a lot, and I would love to take pieces from, you know, Robin's career, from Bjork's career, but it's not the same. Like, I don't literally want exactly the things, you know? So, because my career isn't moldable like that. And I suppose that's why I do like really identify with Robin. Like, her journey in ways is similar to mine, and we really bond over that, you know? But yeah, I kind of forgot the question, but I think I said something.
No, that clarifies.
Okay.
In your interview with The Face recently, great interview.
Oh God, what did I say?
No. It's totally fine. Okay. It's so fine. You mentioned that you have actually had a total dry phase creatively. So that shocked me. I was like, I thought that the whole thing, you know, the tap was just always on.
No.
So how rare is that? And what do you do to get out of it? You know, what are your do you have creative strategies that you would share with other people?
Subscribe. We're on a goal to hit 10,000 subscribers. Comment, engage. If you don't engage, the views will be terrible. If you engage, the views will be great. If you love the video, please engage. Thank you very much.
And it was kind of just sitting there. And then I had the kind of normal dry phase of like the kind of the rest and recuperation phase, the 3 months after you finish the record, where you're just like, okay, I'm going to chill. And, you know, and then I began to notice like, oh, it's been 4 months and now it's been 5 months. And I hadn't really got this like spark. I hadn't really got this like thing back yet. And the album Crash hadn't come out. So I was kind of in this sort of like limbo phase where I was like getting ready to go, you know? And I mean, my managers are here and they're my best friends who I've been with since, we've known each other since we were 11. Like, I have a breakdown when I'm like, guys, like I can't do music anymore. I'm not a musician. Like, I want to quit, like, la, 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 la. And I really just have to go there. Like, I have to just like, almost like bleed dry kind of. And I think, honestly, this is a really annoying answer because I know that not everybody has this privilege, but for me, it's about like waiting it out. Like, I have to wait. And I did one session with Fred, again, Fred again. I did a session with him.
We know.
You're familiar. Anyways, so he was like, when I have a like dry creative phase, I work through it. Like I have to like work. And he was even talking about in the studio, if he, can't come up with an idea and then he tries another idea and then he still can't come up with an idea, he pushes through until he gets an idea. And that was like amazing to me because I cannot do that. I'm like, if I don't have an idea, I'm gone. Like I'm leaving, I'm going home. Like I can't, I think it's so different for different people. Like I cannot push myself because I get frustrated. And when I'm frustrated, I'm not going to do anything good. I'm going to like just be so like, so I have to wait. I have to breathe and wait.
Was there then some sort of moment or spark where Brat started to form in your mind? Where did that come from?
I think there was. I think AG and I started doing like a couple of sessions, just sort of for fun, playing around with things. And, I was sort of talking about, just like club I was like club vibes. Like that it feels right. Like, the pendulum of Crash had swung. I was like, fuck this pop shit. Like, I was like, don't want to do this. Like, because, I'd gone so deep on Crash. I'd been like, I want pitch records. I want an A&R. I'd never like had an A&R. I was like, give me an A&R. Like, they do that. Let's get one. And I was like, give me pitch records.
Now, the impact of Brat, I'm going to keep this simple and short. Brat was an album that characterized the entirety of 2024. It was a true experience, both in the club scene and outdoors. The electronic sound with hyperpop, with a mix of club music and also crazy instrumentals and beats she made. A combination of this plus powerful songwriting from Charli XCX gave a complete experience to the fans where the entire world was filled with Brat. It became their aesthetic, it became their identity, it became their branding. Brat was everything. Charli XCX's album Brat is to the point where throughout the world, no matter what part of the world you're from, you can identify the Brat green color that they used in the album cover. And that is the impact of Brat by Charli.
This has been the total opposite of like an overnight success story. I've always been caught in this dichotomy of, am I a left field underground artist or am I supposed to be a pop star?
People are obsessed over the way that you presented this music. They say you claimed a color. It's great.
They say.